Presented by Cursed by the Witch. Warning, use headphones before listening to horror podcast story.
The House That Bled is a terrifying and macabre tale about a haunted mansion where the walls seep with blood, harboring dark secrets and cursed spirits. The story follows Leela, a young journalist who, drawn by curiosity and the promise of a sensational article, decides to investigate the notorious house after hearing rumors of paranormal occurrences that have plagued it for decades. What starts as a simple exploration quickly devolves into a horrifying descent into madness as Leela uncovers the grisly history of the house and its vengeful spirits. Part 8. The Invitation. The story begins with Leela Anders, a determined and adventurous journalist who works for a small-town newspaper. Leela's editor, hearing rumors of strange happenings at a long-abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town, tasks her with writing a feature story on the so-called Bleeding House. According to local legend, the house, known as Ravenmoor Manor, was the site of a brutal massacre in the early 1900s, after which it gained a reputation for being cursed. Over the years, several owners attempted to live there, but all either fled or mysteriously disappeared. The most disturbing part of the legend is the claim that the walls of the house literally bleed, a sinister manifestation of the deaths that took place there. Leela is intrigued by the tale, though she doesn't fully believe in the paranormal. She considers the bleeding walls to be a myth, exaggerated over time. Still, the house has been sealed off for decades, and no one has dared to enter it for years. Determined to uncover the truth and write the story of her career, Leela convinces her editor to let her spend the night in the house. Armed with her camera, notebook, and a flashlight, she sets off one evening to investigate. Part 2. Entering the house. Ravenmoor Manor stands at the edge of the woods, far from the nearest neighbor. It's a hulking, decaying structure, with boarded-up windows and a heavy iron gate. The air around the house feels oppressive, as though it's weighing down on Leela the moment she steps onto the property. Despite her growing unease, she pushes open the gate and walks up the weed-choked path to the front door. The old, ornate door creaks as it opens, revealing a dark and musty interior. Inside, the house smells of rot and decay. Dust coats every surface, and the air is thick with a sense of abandonment. The furniture is covered in white sheets, and cobwebs hang in the corners of the high-ceilinged rooms. As Leela moves through the house, she notices strange things immediately. The temperature drops drastically in certain rooms, and faint whispers echo through the halls, though she knows she's alone. The most unsettling thing, however, is the feeling of being watched. Every step she takes feels as though unseen eyes are following her, and shadows seem to shift in the corners of her vision. Leela brushes off the sensations, convincing herself that it's just her nerves. But deep down, a creeping dread begins to take hold. Part 3. The First Signs of Blood. As the night wears on, Leela sets up her camera and begins exploring the house more thoroughly. She takes photos of the old furniture, the dusty portraits on the walls, and the decrepit rooms. But as she passes through the grand hallway, something catches her eye, something that sends a chill down her spine. One of the walls, just above the staircase, is stained with what looks like fresh blood. The crimson liquid seems to be oozing out of the wallpaper, slowly dripping down onto the floor. Leela is stunned. The stories of the bleeding house flash through her mind, but she still tries to rationalize what she's seeing. Perhaps it's rust or mold, she tells herself. But when she touches the stain, it's unmistakably blood, sticky, warm, and fresh. Panic begins to rise in her chest as more blood begins to seep through the walls, running in rivulets down the stairs and pooling at the bottom. Suddenly, the whispers in the house grow louder, more urgent, as though the house itself is trying to communicate with her. The temperature drops even further, and Leela can see her breath fogging in the air. She decides to leave, but when she heads toward the front door, she finds it locked tight. No matter how hard she pulls, the door won't budge. The house seems to have trapped her inside. Part 4. The Dark History of Ravenmoor Manor. As Leela frantically searches for a way out, she stumbles upon an old journal hidden in the library. The journal belonged to Margaret Ravenmoor, the wife of the original owner of the house, Elias Ravenmoor. According to the journal, Elias was a cruel man who became obsessed with dark rituals and black magic. He believed that by performing blood sacrifices, he could achieve immortality. His victims were not strangers, they were his own family members and servants, all brutally murdered in the name of his twisted ambitions. The final entry in Margaret's journal reveals her horrific fate. She writes of how Elias, driven mad by his lust for power, decided that his final sacrifice must be her. On the night of the blood moon, Elias slit her throat in the grand ballroom and spilled her blood across the floor. But before she died, Margaret cursed the house and her husband, vowing that neither he nor anyone who entered the house would ever know peace. Her curse bound the souls of all who died there, trapping them within the walls of Ravenmoor Manor, doomed to suffer for eternity. Leela realizes with growing terror that the blood seeping from the walls is not just a supernatural phenomenon, it's the manifestation of the violent deaths that took place within the house. The house itself is cursed, feeding off the suffering of its former inhabitants, and now, it has claimed her as its next victim. Part. The haunting begins. As the night progresses, the manifestations within the house become more violent. The bleeding walls are only the beginning. Leela starts hearing the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls, though no one is there. Doors slam shut on their own, and she hears distant screams coming from the upper floors. Shadowy figures dart across her vision, disappearing as quickly as they appear. Leela's fear turns to panic when she encounters the spirits of the Ravenmoor family. They are pale, ghostly figures, their faces twisted in agony. Margaret appears first, her throat still gaping from the wound Elias inflicted on her. She reaches out to Leela, her voice a rasping whisper, "You must leave, before it's too late." But when Leela tries to follow Margaret's ghost, the other spirits block her path. They are angry, vengeful souls, trapped in eternal torment, and they have no intention of letting Leela escape. The spirits begin to torment her relentlessly, whispering in her ear, brushing cold hands against her skin, and appearing just behind her when she looks into mirrors. The house itself seems to shift and change, the walls warping and closing in on her, leading her in circles. No matter how hard she tries, Leela cannot find a way out. Part 6. The Ritual Room. In a last-ditch effort to escape, Leela returns to the journal, hoping to find a clue about how to break the curse. She reads about the ritual room, hidden in the basement, where Elias performed his dark sacrifices. According to the journal, the only way to end the curse is to destroy the object that Elias used to bind the spirits to the house, an ancient, blood-stained dagger that still lies in the ritual room. With no other option, Leela descends into the basement. The air down there is thick with the stench of death, and the walls are covered in blood. The deeper she goes, the louder the whispers become, urging her to turn back. But Leela presses on, determined to end the nightmare. When she finally reaches the ritual room, she finds the dagger lying on an altar, surrounded by old, tattered robes and the remains of sacrificial victims. Just as she reaches for the dagger, a powerful force knocks her to the ground. Elias Ravenmoor's spirit emerges from the shadows, his eyes burning with madness. He lunges at Leela, his spectral form terrifying and otherworldly, determined to protect the curse he created. Part 7. Breaking the curse. In a frantic struggle, Leela grabs the dagger and drives it into Elias' ghostly form. He lets out a blood-curdling scream as his spirit begins to dissolve, but even as he vanishes, the house shakes violently, as though it's coming apart at the seams. The blood from the walls pours out in torrents, flooding the basement and rising quickly around Leela's feet. With no time to waste, Leela smashes the dagger on the altar, shattering it into pieces. The effect is immediate. The blood stops flowing, and the house falls deathly silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifts, and the spirits of the Ravenmoor family appear one last time, their faces no longer twisted in agony. Margaret smiles faintly at Leela before fading away, finally free from the curse. Part 8. The Aftermath. Leela stumbles out of the house just as dawn breaks, her body trembling and her mind scarred by the horrors she witnessed. She looks back at the house one last time, but now, it stands eerily quiet and lifeless, as though it had never been cursed at all. The blood has disappeared, and the walls are silent. Though Leela survived, she knows that she will never truly escape the house. The memories of that night haunt her, and sometimes, in the dead of night, she can still hear the faint sound of blood dripping from the walls. The House That Bled is a terrifying and atmospheric story, filled with ghostly apparitions, dark rituals, and the lingering presence of evil. The house itself is a malevolent force, feeding off the suffering of those who enter it, and the story leaves readers with the unsettling question, what other horrors lie hidden within its blood-soaked walls?
Thank you for watching. Just like and subscribe.